Gershenson? Here. Kokendorfer? Is absent with notice. Jackson?
Here.
Lubes?
Here.
Joliet?
Here.
Commissioner, can you state where your location?
Yes, here in Waterford, Michigan.
Thank
And
you.
you're there for a medical reason?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Nelson?
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We have minutes from our September 28th, 2021 meeting. If there aren't any corrections or changes, do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Lubes, support by Commissioner Jackson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. We also have a second, I apologize, I should have lumped these two together, but we also have committee minutes dated from October 4th, 2021. If there aren't any changes or corrections, do we have a motion to accept the minutes of our October 4th? Motion by Commissioner Lubes, support by Commissioner Gershenson. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? Minutes approved. Next up, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Prior to approving, I would like to revise the agenda to pull item 9D, resolution revision to the Oakland County Retirement and Deferred Compensation Appointment Process, due to further discussion needing to take place prior to bringing it to committee. With that being said, do we have a motion to approve the revised agenda? Motion by Commissioner Lubes, support by Commissioner Gershenson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Agenda's approved. Next up, we'll move on to our first public comment of this meeting. As a reminder, this public comment is for items related to the agenda items. At this time, do we have anybody from the public who would like to address the Legislative Affairs and Government Operations Committee?
Commissioner, it's Joe Roselle.
Yes, good
from the
morning.
Elections Division. Good morning, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well. I just wanted to thank the committee for taking up the elections item on today's agenda, and thank Commissioner Markham for bringing that forward. It's important that we get accurate information about what took place in November of 2020 out there. Threats on election officials are very real. Our office has received death threats. My colleagues across the country have received death threats. Election officials have been run off the road. It's a very scary world that we're operating in right now. So I thank the commission for bringing, and the committee certainly for bringing this resolution forward and supporting our office and the Board of Canvassers and all the work that we do. So I thank the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Roselle. Is there anyone else from the public who would like to address the Legislative Affairs and Government Operations Committee this morning? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Next, we'll move on to communications. There are no items under communications. We'll move on to item number 8, which is our consent agenda. We have 3 items under our consent agenda. Item A, recognition of November 13th through the 21st of 2021 as National Hunger and Homeless Awareness Week in Oakland County. Item 8B, resolution declaring November 18th, 2021 as World Pancreatic Cancer Awareness Day in Oakland County. And the last item, C, resolution declaring November 8th, 2021 as National Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics Day in Oakland County. Do we have a motion under the consent agenda for those 3 items? Motion by Commissioner Jackson, support by Commissioner Gershenson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Madam
Opposed?
Chair,
Oh,
we need a roll call for those
Oh.
because they're resolutions going to the full board.
thank you, Pam. With that being said, roll call, please.
Okay, on the consent agenda, Commissioners Jackson,
Yes.
Loops,
Yes.
Joliet,
Yes.
Gershenson,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you. Motion passes, or consent agenda items approved. Next up, we'll move on to our regular agenda. This morning, our item number 9A, we've got a presentation by Robin Carter, our Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. So I'd like to welcome Ms. Carter to the front of the table. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. How are you all?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for joining us, especially in person. It's good to see faces.
I know, it is, it is.
So
Let
welcome.
me share. There we go. Wonderful. So I haven't met with any of you, and it's been a year as of July 1. So I'm really excited to come and give some updates on what we're doing. Just to make sure you're aware, I will be giving some updates on some of our initiatives, but I'll also be laying some of the foundations to make sure we're all on the same page and how we're leading equity within Oakland County. So as you all know, the position for diversity, Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer was not only championed, of course, by the executive team, but also the Board of Commissioners. So I know that this is a very personal position for you all, so I'm excited to report out where we are. In terms of the description of this position, it serves really for internal and external stakeholders. And so right now, where the focus has really been internally, we are looking to shift a lens on that external piece. And we'll talk a little bit more about that within this presentation. So the way I'll talk to you today, I'll be just using 6 major areas that I want to talk about. Our initiative around the Oakland County Equity Council, the foundational equity training that was provided by our strategic leadership team, as well as provided for our equity council, our external equity audit that's currently in progress, being spearheaded by ACOM, our internal equity audit that's being supported by MTS, and then finally, the equity reports with recommendations and action steps, and that's what we'll be looking to have once all of these reports are complete. It's not moving. So the slide deck is. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Love technology. So let's first talk about DEI defined. It was really important for us as a team to make sure that everyone came into this work with a common knowledge. As you all know, a lot of people think diversity, equity, and inclusion mean different things. And if we don't frame the context of what we're talking about right away, we might lose people just because there's an inconsistency in the meaning of the terms. So for the work that we're leading, diversity is really at the core, talking about the differences, whether it's race, gender, sexual orientation, ethnicity, age, religion, and so much more. But it was really important to acknowledge that there are a lot of identities when we're talking about diversity, but most often people think of race and gender. The other piece we wanted to frame is equity. What is equity, right? A lot of times we think about equity and equality as the same, and it's important to know the difference because they really do have different meanings and they elicit different outcomes, and we'll talk about that in our next slide. Finally, inclusion, really referring to different individuals coming to the table, coming to the county, coming to our spaces, but they're valued and there's leverage in welcoming them as leaders and their voice, but most importantly, they feel like they belong, right? So it's not enough to just bring people in, but making sure that they feel like they belong where they are. So one of the things that I wanted to share today, and I won't go into too much detail, but the first training that we did with all of our leaders was around this idea of operationalizing equity. And it's really important to understand the quadrants of equity so that as we're having dialogue in these conversations, again, we're all really clear on what that means. So when we talk about inequality in the top left quadrant, right, I think it's extremely helpful to use this as a symbol of what that looks like. The kiddo on the left is getting apples just flowing to him in abundance, right, because the tree is tilted. The kiddo on the right is getting no apples. And so when we see inequality, that's pretty, to me, often an easier area for people to understand, right? But then when we talk about equality, which is a term that a lot of people use, it's just give everyone the same thing. Everyone needs equal, right? The problem, as you can see in this diagram, though, is that even with equality, the kiddo on the right still is not getting resources, still not getting the apples. And in a system, right, example, still not having access. So although I think it's important to talk about equality, we want to also make sure that it's clear that it doesn't always elicit the results we're looking for. In the bottom quadrant with equity, we see both of those kiddos get a ladder, and it's looking at what did they need, right? So the one on the right needed a higher ladder in order to acknowledge the system was tilted, but also to get them opportunities. So finally, the last quadrant, which is where we are at Oakland County, wanting to make sure that equity is operationalized, you see that tree is now tilted. And so that's really a symbol for looking at how are we addressing our system? What does our system look like? Are there structures within our system that need to be moved? We often spend a lot of times looking at individuals, and we have to make sure we're considering our processes, our policies. Let's do this again. Okay, there we go. So when we look at the Oakland County Equity Council, we had in January, we launched our first Equity Council, and it was 103 applications that went out. We chose 30 people. As of now, our current count is 27 people due to retirements. The initial purpose of the council was to create a culture that respects diversity, promote cultural sensitivity and understanding, encourage and promote workforce diversity, and then also ensure that the public we serve receives services that are provided in a culturally sensitive manner. This particular application process, we brought in community members to sit on the panel. And so why this was so different than most councils is that we had people who were right in Oakland County. Centro Multicultural La Familia was someone, a representative from there, Autism Alliance, NAACP. We also had the deputies, but the goal was so that right off the bat during the interview process, people were able to make connections that if there's someone from Autism Alliance, that must mean that that's kind of a focus with equity. And right, again, continuously modeling what that means for us. So the Equity Council is represented by mostly all of our, departments. The areas that are missing, though, are Human Resources, Central Services, Prosecuting Attorney, and then the Clerk and Register of Deeds. But as you can see at the top, the two columns on the top, we have representation across the board, which is really important as we launch initiatives and look at goals and strategies. So the current demographic makeup of the council, when we first think about gender diversity, Oakland County employees, right, as a whole, there's 50% female, 49% male, and then 1% that identify as other. In terms of the council itself, right, we have 30% male and then 70% that identify as female. So right away, that tells us as a team that female identifying members on the council are dominant in representation, right? That means we need to make some direct efforts to increase recruitment for males across races, because that's really important to have that voice. Oftentimes when we think about equity work, there's a lot of people that are in the room, and I rarely see white men. And that's important. We want to make sure that everyone knows they're a part of this work and they have a voice. So that'll also be a very important recruitment factor as we think about who's at that table and then who's missing. In terms of racial diversity, Oakland County employee racial demographics are 86% white, 14% people of color. So one of our direct, again, recruitment goals for the next application cycle will be to focus on more representation of people of color. As it stands right now, the most dominant voice of people of color are Black people. So we want to make sure that we have diversity amongst other people of color as well sitting on the table. As it stands right now, we have 17 white people, which consist of 5 men and 12 women, 8 Black people, which consist of 2 Black men and 6 Black women, 1 Hispanic woman, and 1 Asian woman. So again, it's really important as we think about diversity, we are also aware that even when we talk about people of color, there are very different experiences, and we want to make sure that we hear the experiences of all races across the board as well. So, as a council, we went through some strategic planning. As of now, we have our vision, our mission, and our values. There are some areas that we're still critiquing just a little bit, but again, the big picture for the vision of the Equity Council is through our leadership, support, and guidance, Oakland County will become the model in operationalizing diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout all systems so that everyone has access and opportunity to thrive. And that's a really grand vision, but the goal is that we become the blueprint. We have the employees, we have the infrastructure, we have everything that we need to be successful in this work. And as a council, we will make sure that we work very diligently to be able to provide that framework for other counties for years to come. Our mission is Oakland County values a culture that is transparent and respectful to all employees. We embrace diversity, foster inclusion, and create community partnerships. That community partnership is going to be key as we move forward to this work. And as an Equity Council, we're already strategizing on what does that look like in terms of looking at our external partners. So in front of you, what you see are focus areas that as a council and the executive team, leadership, and other employees that I've talked to, there are a lot of areas that they thought we needed to focus on. And of course, we can't focus on them all. So what you see in front of you are 6 areas that are really important and have come across many voices as some of the key pieces to really start looking at operationalizing equity in Oakland County. So the first one is ensure our policies, processes, and procedures are evaluated with an equity lens. To create a culture that acknowledges, celebrates, and values diversity, equity, and inclusion. Collect, analyze, assess data for actions toward equitable outcomes. Build intentional partnerships to ensure all communities are represented and engaged. Communicate with all stakeholders to ensure transparency and accountability around equity goals and outcomes. And then finally, provide continuous learning toward cultural proficiency and social justice. Now, why these areas are so important is as the council starts creating action steps and plans, it's really easy to venture out and want to do it all. But these areas will really help us be very aligned with, does this align with the strategic focus areas? How are we measuring them? And how are we reporting them out, whether it's a success or whether it's an area of opportunity? So, let's move to foundational equity training. The purpose of the initial workshops that we've put our leadership team through, as well as our Equity Council, our deputies were on this training, all of us went through this together. And the goal is to lay the foundation to make sure that we have an authentic commitment in leading diversity, equity, and inclusion, but most importantly, that we have a common language. So as of now, this has been complete. All leadership, as well as all Equity Council leaders have gone through 9 hours of training in the first year, looking at operationalizing equity, valuing diversity, equity, and inclusion, building cultural competence, and managing unconscious bias. Now, it's important to name that although we've completed that for this year, this training will be continuous. We'll continue to offer countywide trainings as well as ongoing conferences and workshops, but also next year, we will have very specific training topics that all leaders and Equity Council members will take together as well. The external equity audit guided by AECOM is still in process. What you're wanting to pay attention to, though, is the fact that we were very intentional in looking at not how our external partners only the services they receive, but how they are receiving them. How do they feel about how they're receiving them? And so that's what that audit really does, is helps us identify that just because we're working with a community or providing a service doesn't mean it's meeting the mark, doesn't mean our community feels it's equitable, and it doesn't mean there's not areas to grow. The internal equity audit has 4 major areas, right? And it really is to evaluate the current culture of all of our departments, but our county as a whole. So often when you come into this work, right, people have these gut reactions. I know what we need to focus on. It's really important to use data to help you understand what direction you want to go into so that you're not spinning your wheels. So the first piece on the survey on workplace culture, that's really to look at the overall culture of the county. Where do we sit? How are people feeling about this work? How do people feel when they show up in their identities, right? The next piece, though, is a very specific audit around department culture. So every department has its own culture, right, depending on if what you do, is it traditionally a more office-centered position? Are you out in the field? All of those things impact your culture. And it's important to know not only what the county looks like, but what specific areas do departments need to focus on. The next part of this audit will focus on focus groups. We know that surveys are a piece of data, but we also know that some of the most impactful data is that anecdotal data, the qualitative data where you can go in and say, I noticed that you were saying this. What experiences have you had? That really helps us drill a little bit deeper down in the areas we need to look at and assess. And finally, for both of those pieces, we'll have action plans and recommendation reports with KPIs aligned. So we know our issues, we've seen what's in front of us, but how do we take action to adjust them and address them? So some highlights that I want to provide you before we come to an end is Oakland County is the first county government in Michigan to become a partner with the National Diversity Council. This is a really big deal because there's no other governments in this, but it opens up a network. You're with some of the top leaders doing this work, but most importantly, we can continue to align best practices as we move forward so that we're proactive and not reactive in our recommendations and policies. Another highlight is that there has been 3 Equity Council leaders who have completed and passed the National Diversity First certification. It is extremely important that we have resources available so that employees, as they lead this work, become content experts, or at least proficient, right, in how you're leading this work. And so these were certifications that was rigorous, and they completed them. And I'm looking forward to our deputies taking this certification as well so that we can ensure, again, that we all have a certification around how we're leading this with best practices in mind. Another highlight is we've launched the Oakland County Equity website. This website will be a hub for resources, for dialogue, frameworks, but most importantly, upcoming events and trainings. So it's a really great opportunity to make sure that we're staying visible and connected for those who want to be a part of the work, those who want to snoop a little bit. You know, I'm not that comfortable just yet, but maybe there's a blog I can look at or an article. It really allows people to interject themselves in this work how they feel comfortable, right? Multiple spaces. Finally, a highlight is 2 departments leading equity councils. There are already 2 departments leading equity councils within their own department. So the health division already has their own internal health equity team, and so does Barb Hankey is leading one with hers as well. Now, the goal, right, at a county level, we launched this equity council, but it's always my goal that when we do this, it's supposed to encourage those leaders to go back and implement those within their own department. So by next year, I'd love to see those numbers, and we will be setting goals on what departments feel confident to now start launching their own internal department equity teams. So they're looking at their own department data and setting goals annually. So next steps. We have our external equity audit that will finalize in November. We have our cultural assessment survey that will finalize in February. We will solidify our equity action plan and equity KPIs by departments, and those are really going to be contingent upon the information provided by both of those reports where directors may want to start looking and framing their equity efforts. We'll also be looking at a deep dive assessment into supplier and procurement diversity. I know there's been a lot of questions around that, so I really want to make sure we keep you in the loop and how that's going. And then finally, we will be extending our equity focus to external communities, right? That's going to be a great opportunity to start looking at how are we not only permeating this work internally, but how is it translating externally? We will be consulting with the National Diversity Council now that we have a partnership with them, and that's in progress currently, them helping us identify what other governments have done all around, right? It's a national council, and what has been best practices. So who are the people who should be at the table for our external partnership to ensure it is successful? That is all I have for you, so let me know if you have any questions.
Well, thank you, Robin, for coming before us this morning and giving us this presentation. It does give us an idea of the important work that you do, and it's such a significant diversity, inclusion, and equity, especially these days. There's no important time than ever, and to make sure that we are leading Oakland County with those important thoughts of a diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we are fortunate to have you as our first
Thank you.
Chief Diversity and Equity Officer. Commissioners, Commissioner Gershenson.
Well, I'm kind of blown away by all this information. It's been a long time coming. Many of us have been advocates for something like this for years. So I'm almost overwhelmed with the depth of this field and how it's really grown. And I would love to get a copy of that presentation, just because there are a lot of new ideas for me. So I did see you had the Board of Commissioners represented. Who's representing?
Megan Sellers.
So you didn't put a commissioner on, you put commissioner staff. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, very good question. We actually opened up applications for people to apply, and so Megan applied. That was, there were no other commissioners that did apply.
Okay, so it was open for commissioners to apply?
Yes.
Okay, and is there, you do still have spots available?
We will be launching the application to open back up in January to fill those 3 areas.
Okay.
So when that comes, again, like last time, the application will be put out, and I'll normally tap like over here. I said, hey, just making sure, the application is open until this point. We'll do that same thing again, but I can make sure that I specifically talk to you all and say, hey, just so you know, it's coming.
That would be great.
Yeah.
And I've always felt that we were always aware of the black and white diversity, but to see that we're, is that me? Or that's somebody else?
Somebody on
Okay. To see that we're branching out into the Asian community is extremely exciting to me, because I don't see any Asian faces in the county. So I'm really glad we're doing that. And I'd also like to see some Chaldean representation. So if you need any help connecting with that community, I have a good relationship with many members. And then I'd like to have you come back at least on a quarterly timetable, so that we know what you're doing, and where we can participate, we'll understand the opportunities where we can be involved.
I would love that.
So
That would be
thank you
helpful.
and
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, Robin, for this presentation. And I just wanted to just make one comment, first of all, before my question, is that I appreciate, and I'm sure as a board, we all appreciate you giving us kudos for your position and thinking about the need for a diversity and equity and inclusion officer along with the executive office. So I appreciate that you're recognizing that it was a joint effort as far as you coming. Question.
Yes.
Have you been met with much resistance in trying to get people to understand what this work is about?
That's a really good question, Commissioner Jackson. I think that what I've been met with more than anything is discomfort, right? This is new work. And so for me, there's a lot of different ways to lead this work. For me, it's really important to meet people where they are. For some people, they've never heard of the term equity, and when they've heard of diversity, it was always in isolation to race, particularly Black people. So I think that just making sure that people have a space to know we can unpack this, but also making this work relevant to their own space, right? How do I fit into this work? You want me to lead it, but I've got to know how I fit in. That has been a huge success for me, to connect those voices and connecting that opportunity with people. But I think also creating a space where people can be ignorant and say, Robin, I don't know this and I don't understand this, and having that psychological safety to say, that's okay, let's talk about it. I don't feel that it's been met with much resistance because people have had a space to vocalize where they are. I think the key that we are really working through is the discomfort, and people having to understand that this work is not comfortable, and if it is, you're probably not doing it right.
The second question was, there was a acronym that you used. I just want you to tell us what it was. After or at the point when action steps
Yeah.
are being conducted, you said you would look at KPI?
Yes.
That KPI, I don't know what that is.
Absolutely. My apologies. So KPI are key performance indicators. And so typically with diversity, we will set a lot of goals, but it's always important to make sure that while you're setting that goal, that you have a metric right in place when you set it, right? How will we measure when it's working, and how will we know when it's not? So that key performance indicator is going to help us know where our performance is, but also, do we need to continue to look at this strategy, or do we need a new one? So it's really just building in that measurement and accountability at the front end.
Thank you. And congratulations on reaching out externally. Two of the cities, one of the cities, City of Southfield, as well as Farmington Hills, Michigan, they are in process of hiring diversity and equity inclusion professionals at the city level.
Yeah.
So it would be good that you'll be able to meet those individuals and converse with them, and kind of just keep track of all the municipalities that are undergoing this effort as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson.
Chair.
Robin, I have a question. How are we engaging our county employees in diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, so right now, for this year one, it was really important to lay that foundation with our leadership team. What we know through research is that if our leadership teams are not on board, it's very difficult to translate this work. So one of the mild ways, right, and it's not as aggressive as we'd like to be in year three, is the Equity Council. By having those voices, the Equity Council leaders go back to their department. They lead conversations during professional development. I always vet the project, or, I've had someone say, Robin, I want to do this. I'm like, I don't know, just not yet, right? Baby steps, but they're so eager, and their departments are receiving them well. Now, in full honesty, some departments are not ready, right? But I think that just is really helpful for our equity leaders to know, Robin, they weren't ready for this, and then I can say, well, let's look at what they are ready for. So those faces from the council on the ground has been instrumental to really start moving the conversation throughout the county.
Excellent. I love how you had previously said that you meet people where they are.
Yeah.
And that's the most important, that's where change
Yes.
begins, is meeting people where they are despite where we'd like them to be.
Yes.
So I appreciate and value
Yes.
that you've made that very clear, that ultimately my first goal is to meet you where you are, regardless if I'd like you up here.
Yes,
I'm gonna meet you where you are and work together to get you up there. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
yes, absolutely.
Commissioners, does anyone else have any questions? Commissioner Markham, I know we've got a few commissioners joining us virtually. Commissioner Markham, followed by Commissioner Powell.
Thank you. Excuse me, and good morning to everybody. Good morning, Ms. Cooper. I want to echo what Commissioner Gershenson said. The comprehensive aspects of your presentation were really, really encouraging, and I'm very excited to see that Oakland County is truly so committed to moving out in this DEI space in a very meaningful way. I live in a community where we actually have quite a high Asian population, and we are seeing conflicts. That's a rough word, but there's a lot of discussion happening out here about what resources we have, what DEI really means. And I guess I'm looking for, do you really have a role so that, people in a community such as mine can come to you with issues that they have, or do you see that more on I don't know, how do you see your role in that kind of thing where we have communities that need help, but in my case, it's a library board and the city council is not really ready to address it. So, you're an expert. Could the library have you come speak? How do you see yourself interacting with the communities and other organizations that need help?
Really good question. Can you see me? I think, okay, perfect. I'm looking at the angles in the room and trying to make sure that you can see my reaction. So really good question. I will tell you, I have a lot of people reach out. I've had judges reach out. I've done work with the Chamber of Commerce twice, presented. I have other organizations that'll reach out. So what I will tell you is there has been communities. Southfield has been one that has been very vocal in reaching out and asking me, we're looking at doing this. Does this make sense? So in the meantime, I think it's absolutely appropriate for people to reach out so that I can be of resource. But I think the other part, right, is this external piece, which is why I'm working with National Diversity Council, because we have to start building that leadership within our CVTs. It's important to know that I am a resource, but it's also important to know that they have a lot of resources right within their own communities. And if they don't, how do we build that capacity within? So I'm really excited to look at that external partner to see who are the leaders in those communities that need to be at the table so that they can also assume that leadership role. And where people can feel comfortable coming to me, they also have others right within their own community that they can go to.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple of people I might have reach out to you.
Please do, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Markham. Commissioner Powell.
I thank you for doing such a great job with your presentation. I wanted to also echo with what Gershenson stated as far as having Robin come back and give us maybe quarterly reports or whatever the case may be so that we can stay in tune of her progress in her studies and her findings and everything. And eventually, I'm also going to ask Chair Nelson that I think it's very important that she express this whole report to all 21 commissioners. So eventually when she's ready and comfortable, I would like to see her present to all 21 of us, possibly even at a board meeting. Once, you feel the information is ready to share with all 21 commissioners so that everyone is included and know about this progress and work that she's doing. So that's one thing. I have two questions, and one is I wanted to know, in your office, what does your support staff look like for your department? And then what did they provide you with a budget? And if so, what does that budget look like for you? And is it supportive, or eventually do you think you'll have to come back to us or the executive to expand your budget based on the work, or you will know that answer as you progress? But could you break that down for us? Thank you.
Absolutely. So currently right now, the DEI office is myself, and then I have an administrative support, Jamie Finner, who is phenomenal. So I will tell you that it's kind of a party of two, right? But currently what I think is most important is as we move this work, it's really helpful to assess what that need looks like as opposed to creating a department because of my gut, right? My gut says I need 5 people. My data doesn't support that though, right? And so it's important to me to look at what are the needs for this department. Do we need a person that specifically addresses data? Do we need a manager who can be kind of on the ground when I'm not able to come in? Do we need a trainer to continue to push these trainings? So I think as we assess where we are, I think a lot of the reports that will come after AECOM and MTS are finished with the internal and external assessment. I think that the decision to expand this department will be rooted with data, and it will really be intentional in looking at a needs assessment as opposed to just bringing bodies in a department. In terms of a budget, currently we have a diversity budget of $50,000. Again, do I think that's going to grow? Absolutely. But I typically like to move and see what are my needs and how am I allocating those needs to line items? And are there some needs that don't have to be met with money, but can be met with other resources through partnerships, looking at community opportunities? And so again, I think a lot of this within our year one and starting to do this work will create a much more intentional way of building this department so that it's sustainable, but it's also fiscally responsible.
Commissioner Powell, did you have any other questions? I'm sorry.
Nope, that'll be all. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, is there anyone else who would like to ask any other questions, provide any comments? Alrighty, seeing none. Well, Robin, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and we look forward to having you back and hearing more updates on the great things that you're doing here in Oakland County. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Please reach out anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Next up, we'll move on to 9B, which is collective bargaining agreement fiscal year 2022, fiscal year 2025 collective bargaining agreement with the Michigan Nurses Association for Public Health Nurses. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Loobs, support by Commissioner Jackson. Commissioners, this is a request to approve another collective bargaining agreement with the Michigan Nurses Association for Public Health Nurses. The term of this agreement is from October 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2025, and this agreement approximately covers 90 public health nurses. And I do believe we have April here with us this morning to give us a little bit further insight and answer any questions. So welcome, April.
Thank you, and I'm happy to be back. Again, as Commissioner Nelson had mentioned, this is with the nurses. We have been working with them over the last couple of months to do a formal contract for them. As you know, the last time I was here was just for a wage reopener. You can see the general summary here ranges. We have a 4-year contract instead of 3, with wages for this next year at 1.5, moving into 2, and a 1 in the final year. That will also have a me also clause as we take a look at what our budget can handle for that time period. Benefits and retirement, again, common theme, we're increasing that wellness payment for their health risk appraisal from $100 to $150. Defined contribution increase from the $457. They have also agreed to some changes in healthcare, which include some of the many of the pieces that we discussed with you at Lago last week, which was some changes to some administrative functions, an increase in 23 of their biweekly payment to $10, and an increase in 23 for 24 for to 5 extra, going up $5 for their prescription. Sorry, I'm having a little, must not have enough coffee today. And then a few other things within there is just clarifying some comp time eligibility, maintaining some license maintenance for their CEUs for their license for keeping up with their nursing certificates, and again some of those things that we talked about of making sure that if they're working 10-hour shifts that they're taking vacation in that same 10-hour function. So nothing overly crazy. Again, another very collaborative interplay with the nurses, and enjoyed working with them. And here we have our agreement. So we'll be back again next time for a few more.
Excellent. Thank you, April. Commissioners, is there any further discussion on item 9B? Seeing none, roll call, please.
On 9B, Commissioners Loobs?
Yes.
Joliet? Joliet?
She can't.
Yes.
Gershenson?
Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Nelson?
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nays. Motion carries. Next up, we'll move on to item 9C, resolution exempting Oakland County from Public Act 152 of 2011 for calendar year 2022. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Loobs, support by Commissioner Gershenson. Commissioners, this is a request to exempt Oakland County from the requirements of Public Act 152 for calendar year 2022. Public Act 152 provides for certain limitations on the amount of public employer that a public employer may contribute towards the annual cost of employee medical benefits. Commissioner Gershenson, do you have a question?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to understand this. Is there someone to speak?
Sure.
Yeah.
We have April here this
Yeah,
morning
yeah,
to give us further explanation and explore. So welcome again, April.
Thank you. I'm actually going to give an opportunity here to Stephanie Bedricky. She is our supervisor over benefits and wellness, and she's going to give a little overview about what PA 152 is and where we are with that. And of course, I'll step in if anybody has any further questions or Stephanie needs my support. So Stephanie, I'm going to call you up.
Sure. Welcome, Stephanie.
Hi, hello, Commission. Thanks for having me. A little bit about PA 152 that was enacted in 2011. The state identifies what those hard caps are. Historically, Oakland County has opted out of the Public Act. This allows us to do what's best for our employees, and it keeps their costs lower, and it helps with our recruitment and retention practices.
Okay.
So I'll just go a little bit more into detail on the hard cap, just to, I'm not sure how many people know. So back in 2011, this was put in play to help some communities that otherwise were somewhat hamstrung by union contracts as it relates to the cost of healthcare. And so by doing that, they gave some relief to the communities that needed it to require the 20% contribution to their healthcare costs. And if you were a community that maybe they didn't need that or had other alternatives in how you were balancing your budget, you could be essentially what's called opted out. So that's still in play. Originally in 2011, it came out it was going to be for all employees, and then they exempted the public safety unions from that as well. So every year you have to take a look at where you are with the hard cap and make a conscious decision to opt out or put in play the hard cap, which again would require, I believe, the 20% contribution or something with alignment of that. Are there any particular questions on 152 before Stephanie goes into where we're at?
So April, I guess I do have a question for clarification and learning more about it. How does the Public Act 152 come into play with the 5-year strategic plan that we just heard during our last LAGO meeting in regards to benefits and contributions for healthcare and cost-saving measures?
Yep. Stephanie, do you want to take that for a minute?
Yeah, and let me know if I need to expand, but even with if there are increases in contributions and any other, well, two things. If there are increases in contributions, I don't anticipate that we will get anywhere near the hard cap. There will still be a difference. But also by us being able to lower our costs of those benefits, it could actually have an increase in the difference between what the hard cap is and what the county is actually paying for benefits.
And that's actually exactly why we are opting out, because we have our own 5-year plan. So that's just the way that Oakland County has been handling. The healthcare has been different, or balancing their budget has been focused more on wages or other things. We did the same thing in Ferndale. We had a good relationship with our employees. We handled our healthcare in a different way that was best for us in Ferndale. So we always did opt out as well.
So choosing to opt out now, is there any significant impact that this has?
It allows us to have our own plan. So by opting out means that we're not bound by these price points. If we didn't opt out, we could potentially increase all of our employees' contributions by 13%. So that's why we're choosing to opt out, so that we can do what works best for the county.
I see.
Does that make sense? It's a little complicated.
Commissioners?
If you don't opt out, you actually put in play those requirements, and you would have to increase people's contribution.
Okay. Commissioner Jackson.
Ms. Lynch just addressed my question. I wondered about the net effect on the employee, and you restated it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Stephanie, if I'm not mistaken, just for clarity purposes, history has been since 2011, Oakland County has opted out.
Always, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Commissioners, is there any further discussion on this item? 9C. Seeing none, roll call, please.
Joliet,
Yes.
Nelson,
Yes?
Gershenson,
Yes.
Lubes,
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries. Thank you so much for joining us, April and Stephanie.
Thank you.
Next up, we'll move on to item 9E, resolution, support for Oakland County's clerk's election process, the Board of Canvassers, and confidence in the results. And I do believe we have the sponsor, Commissioner Markham, here with us this morning.
Wait,
You need a
9
motion.
9E.
Oh, I'm sorry, do we have a motion?
9E is
We have
the advocate passage, or was 9D removed?
Yes.
9E. Yes.
Which was
Am I
the
looking on the
clerk's
wrong?
No, you're right.
Oh, it's here.
90 was removed.
9D.
So, I'm sorry, as point for clarification, I can't hear you, Pam. What were you
sorry.
saying? I'm sorry?
Was 9D removed, the clerk's item?
Yes, at the onset of the approval of the agenda, I revised by pulling that item, and we did get a motion of the revised
Correct.
agenda.
Correct. So what item are we on now? I just wanted to clarify.
So item 9E.
Okay.
So do we have a motion for support of the Oakland County Clerk's election process, the Board of Canvassers, and confidence in the November 3rd, 2020 general election results? Motion made by Commissioner Gershenson, support by Commissioner Jackson. And I do believe we have the sponsor, Commissioner Markham, here with us this morning.
Yes, good morning again. Thank you for allowing me the time to bring this resolution forward. I think it's really, really important that we as a body and as a bipartisan organization affirm the work and the integrity of the clerks in Oakland County. But also, I believe it's important to understand that our process is the same as everybody else's process, and the state of Michigan had many audits such that the Secretary of State could affirm the election. As Mr. Rozelle stated, there is a cancer of misinformation out there all across our state. Many of us, not only the clerks, but mostly the clerks on this issue, are being harassed, threatened, called names, stated that they're lying. Their integrity is called into question, and yet they are probably some of the most dedicated public servants we have across the state. There's over 3,500 of them. So I asked staff to get with Mr. Rozelle and pull together a series of whereases that we could support, saying that not only do we think our election was conducted properly, but that we believe that that is the way we operate across Oakland County and across the state. I feel like if we really mean what we say about how we want to tone down the heat in this state and across this country and how people are talking to each other, I really feel like election integrity is a place where we should be able to come together. Some of you know this, many of you probably don't. My father was the Oakland County Clerk from 1958 till 1964, so I have followed what happens in the clerk's offices all my life. I was a little girl when that was going on, and he would take me to look at the voting machines with the levers and all of that. I believe our system is second to none. I want to support that, and I really hope that we can have bipartisan support at the board level. I understand Commissioner Joliet has introduced an amendment, and I would like us all to talk about that for sure. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the commission, to the committee. Sorry.
Thank you, Commissioner Markham. Before we go into the amendment, do any commissioners have any questions or comments in regards to this item? Commissioner Gershenson.
Well, I just want to thank Commissioner Markham. This is a growing issue all across the country. I was just listening last night. Certain communities in other states have election officials, and some of them are being forced to resign because they are not submitting to certain demands by people that are challenging the integrity of the elections. So I think this is an important statement to make, and I thank you for making it.
Thank you, Commissioner Gershenson. Commissioner Joliet?
Hi, do I need to make a motion for this amendment, or do we just need to discuss it?
Yes, we do need a motion. Is, prior to that, is the amendment in the packet?
Yes, it is in the civic clerk, and it's right underneath that.
Okay, so,
It's right underneath this item.
Okay, so can you help me find that? I don't see it.
it is,
I mean, I'm logged into civic clerk.
Right above it, right above the item.
I have the draft resolution.
Says
And right below it, there should be an amendment
Yeah, I
to
don't,
click on.
you
proposed.
need me to refresh?
It's a separate item, so you may have to click on it's
Right in the agenda.
possibly amendment.
you might have to refresh.
I was thinking
Civic
I'll
Clerk.
refresh. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Joliet. Do we have support? I'll support.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I do think this is an important resolution to bring forward. I echo what Joe Rozelle said, that we need to support our office, and I have great faith in Oakland County's election process, and I guess that's what my amendment speaks to, that I think we need to send a message to our voters, our constituents, that Oakland County did a great job. And that's what we have control over. We have control over Oakland County's elections. And I think that we need to stay focused on the county's business, which is the election process. So for that, I don't talk to the Secretary of State. I don't know their system. So for that reason, I'm proposing these amendments to have it more focused on Oakland County. And I think Oakland County does an exceptional job, and I would feel very comfortable sending this message to my constituents.
So for clarification, Commissioner, there's two. So the first is to remove completely, just so I'm understanding, remove completely the fifth whereas clause.
Right,
And
as
then-
a reference to the state. Right,
Okay.
correct.
And then the second is adding and removing language to the fifth whereas. So you've redrafted that fifth whereas with different language after striking
Right.
it out.
Right, just changing Michigan voters to Oakland County voters, just to make this a more Oakland County focused elections integrity.
Okay. So the fifth whereas isn't being removed completely, you've just added and inserted,
No, the fifth whereas is being removed completely, and then the now therefore let it be resolved. I'm just switching out Michigan voters to Oakland County voters.
I see, thank you.
I see, because I see why that's confusing.
Oh,
I have it's a typo in the amendment. I apologize.
Oh, okay. So what?
Where it says add, remove the following language in the fifth whereas, it's not supposed to say fifth whereas, it's supposed to say add, remove the following language in the now therefore be it resolved clause. But the language of the clause itself should be correct.
Okay, so
Correct.
thank you for that clarification. So essentially, the fifth whereas has been completely omitted, removed, and then in the first now therefore be it resolved clause is where we've this amendment adds to, in addition to removing some language. So
Correct. Correct.
thank you for that clarification, Amy. Okay, commissioners, questions, comments, open for discussion. Commissioner Markham, would you like to lead in the discussion as the sponsor of that in regards to the amendment?
Well, yes, and I appreciate Commissioner Joliet's amendment, but I disagree with it because I do think that this is part of a bigger message that I want to send. It's not only that we are affirming Oakland County's elections, but that we believe the process by which we operate elections in this state is safe, and we all operate the same way. Every county has the same, has election equipment that's been approved by the state and so on. And I think the fact that we know we ran a clean election according to the rules, and all the other counties have said the same thing. I do want a piece of this resolution to be that we are in support of what's happened across our state. I'm also hopeful that other commissions will do the same thing. I think we need to have a chorus out there that says we believe in our elections. And the boundaries, we live in our county, which is a square, but the news media and conversations happen across the state and across the boundaries. And I think it's important that we are a very strong county. We are a very important county to this state. And I think our message will carry. So I am not in support of the amendment, but thank you.
Okay. I appreciate your feedback, and I would be in support of the amendment if it was focused on Oakland County, but I will agree to disagree, and I see your point. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you both, Commissioner Markham and Commissioner Joliet. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, roll call on the amendment.
Jackson?
No.
Gershenson?
No.
Lubes?
No.
Joliet?
Yes.
Nelson?
No.
Madam Chair, you have 1 yay and 4 nays.
1 yay, 4 nays, motion fails. Now back to the initial motion. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing that there's no further discussion on item 9E, roll call, please.
On item 9E,
We need a motion for 9E.
Gershenson?
We had Gershenson and Jackson.
Oh.
Gershenson? Gershenson?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Jackson?
Yes.
Lubes?
Yes.
Joliet?
No.
Nelson?
Yes?
Madam Chair, you have 4 yays and 1 nay.
4 yeas, 1 nay, motion carries. Next, we'll move on to our last item of the agenda, which is 9F. Resolution advocate passage of House Bill 5026 to amend the Emergency 911 Servicing Enabling Act. Do we have a motion? Motion by Commissioner Lubes, support by Commissioner Joliet. And I believe our sponsor, Commissioner Lubes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This resolution is to present our 911 Service Enabling Act, which expires December 2021, and continued operation and funding of 911. And we do have our staff person, Pat Coates, here to add additional information.
Thank you, Commissioner. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Pat Coates. I'm the County 911 Coordinator. I work at Clemis over at IT. The current bill is to amend the Public Act that started in 1980. It's PA 32 of 86. It was the 911 Enabling Act. Back then, telecommunications were very different. Everybody had a landline. And the funding for the network, the old copper telephone network that supported 911, was a surcharge that every person with a landline, every business, every individual paid. So back in 2006, the cost of the 911 network has never been a local or county cost. It's all supported by the users of the system. Now, over the years, this act has had to be tweaked and amended because telecommunications changed. we added in wireless, and now actually more than 85% of 911 calls come from wireless devices. There are not that many landlines anymore. There are voice over IP, voice over internet protocol phone systems, such as those you might have if you have Vonage, or if you get your phone service through your cable company. That's a VoIP system, and the county has just changed to a VoIP telephone system. So over the years, the network had to be tweaked because the old network could handle very little data. It could give us the caller's voice, but it could not give us much more than their name, address, and phone number. Nowadays, telecommunication devices, as you know, are computers. They can send us all kinds of information about the location of the caller. We now do text to 911, which helps the speech and hearing impaired community. We can get telematics from vehicles that are equipped with devices that actually send information to 911. So the old copper network just didn't work anymore. It wouldn't support that much data. About 7 years ago, Michigan started transitioning to what's called an EZNet, an Emergency Services IP network. And this is a fiber network that will support all the kinds of data that 911 needs to be able to process today. Oakland County is on that EZNet. We have been for about 5 years. The provider of choice in Michigan has been Peninsula Fiber Network. It's a local Michigan fiber provider out of the Upper Peninsula. And 82 of the 83 counties have already moved to Peninsula Fiber Network. So they are our network of choice. As all these transitions occurred, however, even though there are many local costs for 911 for operational and equipment costs, the network has still been funded by a user fee. But the user fee has changed. There is still a user fee on landlines, and anyone who has a contractual relationship with a service provider. I have a landline. I also have a contract for my cellular service. And that fee, 25 cents for every device that can contact 911. But there are a lot of users out there who don't have contracts anymore. We call them prepaid users or pay-as-you-go folks. They're the kinds who go out and buy minutes, if you will, and load them on their phone. 4 years ago, when we went back to the legislature, asked for the funding for this network, we took a lot of federal standards as far as those prepaid customers. It's hard to know how many of them are in a state. It's hard to know what their average cost is. 25 cents a month didn't make sense because many of them will load up enough minutes for a whole year at a time. So instead, on those prepaid, is a percentage of the cost of the sale at the time of the sale. Right now, that's 5%. All of those fees together pay for the network so that it does not become a county or a local cost. And we did a lot of research with the FCC, with the cellular telephone industry to try and figure out how much that prepaid percentage should be. We have some good news. The cost of the network is right on, perfectly spot on. It's one of these projects I can tell you did not go over cost. And our estimate on the contractual and the landline type customers, that 25 cents, was accurate. But the prepaid revenue has not come in as we expected. We're not sure why. There are a number of reasons for that. When we went back to the legislature 4 years ago, the average cost was almost $40 a month that people were downloading. Now you can go online and download a lot of minutes for as little as $10. So 5% of the cost has decreased. We're also not sure that every retailer who sells these minutes is remitting and collecting that surcharge to the state. We know the big ones are, the Walmarts and the carriers are, but we don't know about every mom and pop shop out there that sells these kind of cards. And we really don't know about the internet sales, which have just mushroomed. More and more people are downloading their service from the internet. And if I go online and download service to my phone, I might be dealing with a company in South Dakota or Texas that doesn't know the Michigan law, doesn't know they're supposed to remit 5% to the state. So that revenue has come in short. If we do not change that fee, the network fund in Lansing will be by 2023. And if it's not fixed, some of those costs will revert to the county. So to avoid that, I've been working with the Michigan Communications Directors Association, which is a statewide group of 911 professionals. And we've made a number of recommendations, which the bill sponsor of 5026 has accepted. Originally, we thought we needed to increase both the 25 cents to 27 cents and the 5% on the prepaid to 6.5%. Fortunately, the legislature came through with an appropriation. They have granted the fund $16 million to help offset the hole that's already been dug by the loss of this revenue. So we do not need to increase the 25 cents. That will remain static at 25 cents. However, the prepaid folks are still not paying an equitable share of the network costs. So the current bill that you are considering does increase it instead of to 6.5% to 6%. That will allow the fund to continue, and this will not revert to becoming a county cost. As the commissioner mentioned, the bill does sunset this year, and that's the most critical piece. We need to have the legislation extended. The bill does extend it through 2027. We've always asked for a sunset on this bill because it's technology and it's telecommunications, and it changes constantly. And we feel the need to go back to the legislature and explain changes and any costs that might. So the sunset will be 2027. We are asking for an increase to 6%. We're asking for some technical changes. There are a lot of clauses in there about how a county board of commissioners can amend the county 911 service plan. And that language goes back to 1986. Everything has to be done by U.S. mail, for example. This will allow some changes where you can actually do some electronic notifications. Should the county choose to do that, you can still always rely on U.S. mail. It also removes all the references that we worked on so hard 4 years ago on multi-line telephone systems. We are deleting all of that because there is now federal law that supersedes it and in some cases conflicts with it. So I've been getting calls from businesses that have those kind of systems asking which set of laws they should adhere to. This will remove the state one, and we'll only have to work from the federal one. It also adds some language that requires Treasury to do an audit of the fund. They have fallen rather short on that in recent years. And this would require them to audit not only the fund, but who is not remitting. What retailers out there are not remitting to the fund. We are hopeful that that will increase some revenue because it's fair that everyone who can use 911 pays for it. Lastly, there is language in there that includes a rollback. Should the Treasury actually find more people who need to be paying and get them to pay, there's rollback language that would allow that 6% to go back down automatically if the funding exceeds $12 million for more than 3 consecutive quarters. So we don't want to overcharge anyone, but we certainly want everyone to pay an equitable cost. The bill sponsor on 5026 is Representative Callie. We've had one set of testimony in the House in front of the Communications and Technology Subcommittee. They are tentatively scheduling more testimony tomorrow, but there is some debate. Obviously, anytime you raise a fee, there are questions. Right now, the phone companies are fighting some language in there that calls anybody who has not been remitting to pay interest and back payments. They don't want to see that in there. So there may be a substitute, but the guts of the legislation are that we need to increase the fee so that it does not become a county cost. We need to extend the sunset. We need to make some technical changes, and we want to have language in there that ensures an audit and compliance. Are there any questions?
Commissioner Gershenson.
Well, hi, Pat, welcome. That was a lot of information.
I'm sorry.
No. Is this time sensitive?
It still has to go out of committee and to the full House, then on to the Senate. So considering their rather shortened calendar in Lansing this year, I don't know when the Senate will take it up. If they take it before their Thanksgiving break, it certainly is time sensitive. If they go into December, we're all going to be in panic mode because we're getting close to the sunset. But either way, we only have a few months left, and they have a very short calendar this year.
Okay, I would like to understand is there opposition to this? I'd like to understand both sides of the argument. Pat, I have a lot of confidence in the work that you do and in your recommendations, but this was a lot to understand. And if you're saying that we would have until at the short end to Thanksgiving, we do have another LAGO meeting on November 2nd.
And I cannot guarantee that. If it goes through committee and they were planning to vote tomorrow, it could go to the full House in a matter of days and then on to the Senate. So this may happening very quickly, so I cannot guarantee that. Right now, there is no opposition to the bill. At the testimony we gave on the 6th, everyone was in support, including some major players like AT&T, the Telephone Association of Michigan. The only question is really with Treasury. They are discussing exactly how the audit language would work. Is it retroactive, which it is not intended to be, but they want language in there to make sure we're not going back after people who have not been remitting for the past 4 years. We wanted to move forward.
Okay, I understand, Pat. Does this go to any other committees?
At the House, no.
On the commission.
No,
This doesn't go to finance or anything like that?
No, the next action after this will go to the full board.
Okay. Thank you, Pat.
Commissioners, is there any further discussion on item F, advocating for the passage of House Bill 5026 to amend the Emergency 911 Service Enabling Act? Commissioner Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to, because I'm making note of the second whereas in the resolution, it states without an extension of the act, Oakland County has no authority to provide 911 service or to determine the technical, operational, managerial, or fiscal aspects of 911 service within the county and service district. So that sunset for December 31st, that's what they're speaking of, if that should transpire before the state takes action upon this, then we would not be able to.
It is the 911 Enabling Act. It is the only act that allows Michigan or anyone in Oakland County or Oakland County to actually empower 911. Without this act, the phone companies, et cetera, are not required to adhere to Michigan standards. There are still some federal rules that might be in place for the wireless carriers, but the regular telecommunication carriers are actually governed by the Michigan Public Service Commission, and this act is the only thing that really enables 911 in Michigan. So we cannot allow it to sunset.
Okay, that seems crucial, very crucial to me. And then the second aspect, you mentioned the term EduNet, and I hadn't heard that term in a long time. And I remember 4 years ago when Robert Dadow was speaking about a possibility of the county being very, very harmed by these types of fees and the cost of the EduNet or the balance of the whole transaction. There's nothing in the resolution about the EduNet. And Commissioner Gershenson, the point that she's making is very, very critical, because whenever in the past, and you know this, Pat, because you've always been the leader in these types of resolutions, we get a lot of consternation from the public. At this point in time, the 5 to the 6.5% increase, could you just let us know again what population that affects? Is that just the prepaid users? Or what population does that 1.5, it is the prepaid users only?
Right. It is just the folks who use the prepaid, the pay-as-you-go kind of users. Those of us with contracts for landlines or contracts for cellular or VoIP service, we're already paying 25 cents, and that continues.
Okay.
This would be just for the folks who buy it from a retailer, buy it online, buy their minutes, whatever. They are already paying considerably less than contractual customers are, because for one thing, it's tend to be a little bit cheaper, but also there are surcharges. As you know, the county assesses a local surcharge, 42 cents a month, that goes towards our costs for one network, our 911 equipment, and for our radio system for all our public safety responders. Prepaid customers don't pay that. So that, the is kind of takes into account an average of all those local surcharges throughout the state, because they're already getting a break on some surcharges. So increasing it from 5% to 6%, which really keeps it in line with sales tax and is something most people understand, is not huge for most of these folks.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That was my concern.
Thank you. Commissioners, any further discussion on item 9F? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Jackson,
Yes.
Lubes,
Yes.
Joliet,
Yes.
Gershenson,
Yes.
Nelson.
Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 5 yeas, 0 nays.
5 yeas, 0 nay, motion carries. Next
Thank
up,
you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Next up, we'll move on to our second public comment. As a reminder, this second public comment is on topics other than items that are on our agenda. So at this time, is there anybody from the public who would like to address the Legislative Affairs and Government Operations Committee? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Commissioners, is there anything to come before the legislative, any other further business to come before the Legislative Affairs and Government Operations Committee this morning? Alrighty, seeing none, without objection, I declare this meeting adjourned at 11:16. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hey, Gary. It's like, cut you out of the back line, like, let's get that man back
There's another meeting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, that was a swift one.
I apologize for that.
Oh, absolutely no problem, Gary. I get it. Life happens. Sometimes you think you're late.